This is Jordan Edwards, and this is the Business Jiu Jitsu Podcast. Pleasure to have you on the Business Jiu Jitsu Podcast. Something that I think that you are going to be an expert guest in.
I think so. I've got some experience in both martial arts and business. So
yeah,
at least getting smashed.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you and honored to have you on the podcast because you are you've had an incredible business career. You have too many positions and board memberships to name all, but you are a co-founder and managing director of TwinFocus. You're the commissioner in Massachusetts for mixed martial arts. You're a board member and an original investor in Glory Kickboxing, and a lifelong martial artist yourself. And recently, over the past few years, into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but have practiced in Kali and Muay Thai and a variety of other martial arts. So having somebody with your expertise is going to be really exciting for me in this project. I hope that we could explore some of these principles because they've been so impactful in my life, and that's why I wanted to write this book. But if you wouldn't mind, give me a little background on who you are, how you got into the business world, how you got into the martial arts world, and anything you think that's valuable on how it's affected you.
Sure. So maybe we'll start with martial arts. I was, pretty much addicted to Bruce Lee since I was, 4 or 5 years old, and did karate as a kid. And then late teens or early 20s, I had a friend that introduced me to Muay Thai. And I saw it. I wasn't sure what I was going to see when I was, first brought. And I was instantaneously hooked. And so I was a practitioner and competed in Muay Thai for, probably about the last 20 years or so. I'm 43 now. When I was about 30, I trained in Kali and Jeet Kune Do for a number of years. And then recently, over the last 4 years, got into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I train BJJ pretty much every morning about 5 a.m. Weekdays. And on the business side, yeah.
Where are you from?
Originally from Boston.
From Boston.
Born and raised. Yep. Went to school here, did a stint in New York, but came back to Boston. And my late 20s, I was a broker at originally Payne Weber, which became UBS.
Sure.
And then in my late 20s, I decided to leave and start my own firm. So I started TwinFocus in 2006. And really over the last 15 years, built it from, a small $100 million investment advisor when I started to today. We manage about $7 billion. We have a big business globally, headquartered in Boston. We have an office in London. And we have a growing real estate investment business as well. So lots of exciting things going on at TwinFocus.
And some private equity investments as well. Are your private equity investments in martial arts, or those your personal investments or through your business?
We've had some small investments in martial arts, but mostly martial arts is more of a kind of passion project for me.
Yeah. Really exciting. And the name of your company, TwinFocus, you have a twin brother?
I do. We founded the firm together and we work together as well.
Is he a martial artist, or did he?
No, he's not. He thinks I'm crazy, but he's an avid workout enthusiast. So he gets his workouts in another way.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that because it is something that I'm gonna really try to explore in this book, which is that people who don't participate in martial arts do think you're a little crazy sometimes for having this passion, which could take up a very big part of your life. Is it your brother who thinks you're crazy, or family members?
My wife is quite understanding, but it's funny, we'll be out to dinner with clients and clients will ask me something about martial arts and my brother will just say, "Oh, don't get him started. Don't get him started." Cause as you stated, I'm very passionate about martial arts. I've been involved really in all aspects of the business from, building and owning one of the leading promotions in the world, Glory, to, being a fighter and to, going through a fight camp and training. And then obviously, as a commissioner as well. I was asked by the governor in Massachusetts in 2016 to really take over the kind of MMA and kickboxing seat on the
Yeah.
commission. And I've been serving now for the past 4 years or so.
Well, there's an amazing fight culture in all of Massachusetts, but especially around the Boston area. I recently spoke to both Jimmy Pedro from Olympian, and Travis Stevens. I don't know if you've ever encountered them in your path, but they have schools in the area, and that's quite an honor to have received it. And I do quite a lot of business in Massachusetts, in Springfield, Massachusetts, in the real estate business, and have had dealings with the local and state governments, and always very impressed with the way Massachusetts runs the state. It's been quite impressive, and some of the events that you guys have put on up there have been some legendary events.
Indeed, we've been lucky enough to have UFC, I think 3 times now. So hoping when all of this COVID stuff passes, we'll have them back. So.
Yeah, live events must be a difficult thing to be even talking about right now. It's just, well, the UFC did a great job in Abu Dhabi. I'm very impressed with how Dana White conducted himself through it. It took a lot of risk, as he does. He's a gambler, but I think he kind of pioneered the bubble before the NBA coined the term the bubble.
Yeah, I think so. The UFC obviously is a rare animal, with massive scale and massive global distribution and, a lot of fans. So, they're able to do that. And I applaud them for doing it because they've thrown some really great shows. At Glory, we've got a couple of shows planned for the end of the year. Mm-hmm. So we're just working through that now. Some no audience shows. So
that's great. That's really great. So your capacity in Glory is as that you sit on the board and you were one of the lead investors. Glory, another fantastic promotion. It's really exciting that to be a part of it. I'm so fascinated by the business of martial arts, although that's not really what the focus of what I'm doing here is. But anytime I have a chance to talk to someone who's in the business world, but also kind of goes and dips their toe in the passion. When you and I spoke briefly, we discussed our mutual friend, Rich Byrne, who started the promotion Kasai. And, I asked him when he was on the podcast a similar thing. I said, is this a money-making venture for you? Is this something that you felt like you had to do because of the passion? So I turned that to you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would definitely say both. Glory, sports is a winner-take-all business, right? Why would you drive for Formula 2 if you can drive for Formula 1, right? Yeah. It's a winner-take-all, and the fans want to see the top, whatever it is, the top league, the top promotion. And, when you're talking about, a company like the UFC or like Glory, it's much more than a promotion. It's more of a media property, right? Yep. Because, your average promotion, you're generating revenue, maybe some sponsorship and gate, is obviously the big, kind of winner for you. But with the media property, you've got gate, you've got merchandise, you've got sponsorship, and then you've got TV distribution. It's obviously a chicken and egg. The world has changed so much in the last 10 years in terms of TV distribution because of things like this, right? Podcasts, everybody walking around with devices in their hand where you're able to get kind of the confluence of content and connectivity, and so the barrier to entry for, promotions to get stuff online and get seen is come down quite a bit. So it's obviously made that world a lot more competitive. Yeah. And companies like Glory have had to kind of reinvent themselves, figuring out how you distribute content, how you get paid for that content, versus the old days when UFC simply had a Fox deal, right? And now, UFC has gotten really smart. Obviously, they have a huge ESPN contract, and they've built this really awesome platform called Fight Pass, right, where they've not only put their own content but aggregated all other types of content and provided that to viewers. I mean, I'm a huge UFC fan. I'm a huge Fight Pass fan, and I watch all of the different content up there. The old comment by Dana White that you got baseball over here, basketball over here, and you got two guys fighting in the corner. Everybody wants to watch the fight. So combat's that kind of rare breed that it's just exciting. Whether it's the professional stuff or whether it's the rough and rowdy that you see that Barstools is throwing.
So speaking of that, let's talk about you as a competitor. When was the first time you stepped inside of the ring?
Oh, I fought, I'm not supposed to admit this as a commissioner, but I fought in a bunch of smokers, locally,
Yeah.
which, I think that experience of an actual fight, more than just sparring is so invaluable, right? Because, it's like, even on the street, you forget half of what you know when the adrenaline is going.
Yeah.
The only way you get ready for it is just lots and lots of practice, lots and lots of experience. Very similar to business. 15, 20 years ago, pitching my first big account. And, I remember how nervous I was but you just get better at it over time by telling the story. And today my clients pay me, $1 million a piece as opposed to having $1 million account,
Yeah.
so, but it's just, greatness takes time, which is, one of the interesting things about jujitsu versus a lot of the other arts, whereas a boxing or Muay Thai or kickboxing, I mean, if you're dedicated, in kickboxing or boxing, you can kind of perfect it in a few years.
Yep.
Where jujitsu just takes forever.
Yeah.
It's constant learning, and you only learn by, getting smashed, right?
Absolutely.
So,
That's an interesting aspect of this that I wanted to explore with you, which is you're someone who's had a lot of success in a lot of different fields, yet you are going and humbling yourself by learning this new art. 5 a.m. going and it could be tough on many people's egos. I see people walk through the doors, tough guys, muscle guys, cops, soldiers, and after they get beat up a few times, they don't come back. There's something to be said for someone who can go through that struggle in jiu-jitsu and kind of understand the pecking order and know that you are going to suck for a very long time until you kind of get better.
yeah. Learning a martial art is a lot like learning a language. Um, I've been taking Spanish lessons for about 10 years, and I meet with, just like this, I meet with a professor on Skype at 7:30 every morning, from
Yeah.
7:30 to 7:59 every morning. And it's a lot like learning a language. I mean, you have to learn the cadence, you have to learn the vocabulary, you have to learn the kind of conjugation. And the hard part about learning a language is, they say reading is kind of easiest, then it's listening, then it's writing, and then it's actually speaking. And very similar, where the only real way you actually learn once you have the basics is by getting out there and trying it. And that means screwing things up, screwing up the conjugation, screwing up the vocabulary. And it's the same thing in jujitsu. You learn some basic vocabulary, but you got to kind of throw yourself in there. One of my first jujitsu coaches said to me, the challenge with jujitsu is that, with boxing or kickboxing, there's a logical kind of first step. This is how you stand. This is how you throw a jab, cross, or whatever. With jujitsu, there is no place to start, right? It's just like this circle that you have to kind of jump in and just figure it out. And there's so many things to figure out, right? It's not just timing, distance, and balance like a lot of the other martial arts. I mean, this whole thing about the way you use weight and feel that weight and the shift, and it just takes forever, right? But it's business too. It's the same thing in business. I think about, my firm today, TwinFocus, and they say success is made up of a string of failures. And when you're the same as when I'm up grinding it out every day in jiu-jitsu at 5 a.m. I mean, I've been coming to work at 6 a.m. or 6:30 in the morning for my whole career, since for 20 years. And it's not like you have these little wins along the way, you have lots of little losses along the way, and every now and then you pick your head up, maybe you get some kind of some type of achievement, some type of sign of achievement, whether it's a belt or whether it's hitting a revenue target or something, and you
Yeah.
pick your head up and you say, wow, I can't believe where I've come from. Wow, I did get like Henzo says, 1% better every day, or maybe it's 0.1% better every day.
Yeah.
And I mean, I tell you, every morning I leave just, a sweaty mess and just feeling completely defeated, but I'm learning a little bit, I learn a little bit more every day. So, you get there over time. Right. And, one of my coaches once said to me, when you get your blue belt or your purple belt, it's not like you felt any different in the morning than you did it that night when you actually had the belt. The belt is just this kind of symbolic thing along the way of this kind of growth, the sign of the growth. So
Yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor. Jiu Jitsu, I see as it's there's a lot you can see things in Jiu Jitsu that are harder to see in business. The tap, hitting the mat, getting
right.
swept, being off balanced. These things happen in business too. And in order to get better, get 1% better in business every single day, you need to be consciously thinking about it and coaching yourself and recognizing the wins, recognizing the promotions, like you said, like maybe it's not a promotion, but it's a revenue target. And the people who I really admire in business, they understand this and they look for it. And when I'm coaching younger people in business and trying to get them to see these metaphors, so many times I want to use jujitsu as the metaphor, but it's like speaking French to one of my businesses is I'm in the fashion business. I work with a lot of women. And so I have to reach them on their level. And martial arts metaphors don't typically work. But in the gym, a lot of my teammates, a lot of my younger teammates who aspire to be entrepreneurs and business people, and some of them are phenomenal at jiu-jitsu. And they come to me and they want business advice. And I love sharing the stories and the metaphors and using them in teaching tools for business. And so that's really the motivation for this project. And I love the way that you put it as a circular reference where in martial arts, it starts and begins at the same point. And when you feel like you've reached the end, you're reaching the beginning. That's part of my logo actually for Business Jiu-Jitsu. If I can push you a little bit further down the path of where you were talking, and let's see if we could, you're in the investment business. Something I'm endlessly fascinated with is risk, taking risk, measuring risk, pushing myself to take risks. Is this something that you've encountered, and is this a part of your daily life in business, being in the investment business?
1,000%, 1,000%. And when you're analyzing investment opportunities, and the more you analyze, and over time you kind of build this repertoire of experiences, you start to you have an appreciation for the kind of unknown unknowns. When you're young, almost everything seems like a great investment. Great people, great idea. And I would say that one of the biggest things I've learned in the investment business is that, and in life and running businesses, is that everything just takes more money and more time than we think. And if we knew how much money and how much time in the beginning, we may not have started it, right? And that's kind of that naivete is kind of what, that kind of dream is what kind of pushes us sometimes, and
Right.
and then sometimes then you get so far in and you realize, geez, well, I just got to keep going. I just have to keep going. And, I mean, I've had even just recent experiences over the last 6 months with this, COVID crisis, where I had portfolio companies that were, on the brink of, demise, right? Complete demise.
Yeah.
And, it's very much like jujitsu where, like when you're on the bottom, higher rank, belt on top of you, much heavier, and you're just trying to survive. And, and you make those little moves that create space. And then before you know it, you sweep and you're back on top, and it's a lot of it is kind of last man standing. A lot of it is just that staying power, to be able to endure, the smashing. And then figure out where best to use your energy as well.
Yeah.
In the beginning, a lot in business, you spend a lot of time spinning your wheels on things that don't really matter.
Yeah.
But as you get older, you just get better at kind of allocating your time and your resources. And my wife always says to me that I'm such a cynic, and that I should be more positive about certain things. And I used to be super positive about everything, and it's not that I'm actually a really positive guy, but I've because I've learned the hard way. I've learned to size my opponent up before I jump in the ring with them, right? And whether that's in jiu-jitsu or whether that's in stand-up fighting or whether that's in business, again, the only way you learn is just through a series of failures and a series of getting submitted, swept and submitted, right?
It's true. I love the way you put it of allocating your resources. So much of what I do as the CEO of this business is figuring out how best to use the limited resources and allocate them the best that I can. Allocate the limited capital into the worthy initiatives, or opening a store, or do I open a store? Do I put it into a website, or do I hire a person? How do I hadn't yet considered that as for part of the book, but when you're rolling, you are throttling your energy on and throttling your energy off. You're trying to survive. You're trying to gain an advantage. You're wiggling a little bit to get an arm back or get an elbow in. And you're 100% right. That's a clear parallel between jiu-jitsu and certainly everything that's been going on with COVID.
Same as with striking as well. When you watch glory fighters get up there, who are, arguably top fighters in the world, top, athletic shape in the world, and you see how they, are very careful about how they use their energy. Now, these guys are in the best shape, so guys and gals, you see fireworks, but it's very deliberate, versus a rough and rowdy where it's a barroom brawl, and it's just throwing haymakers and they're gassed by the second round. I say that all the time. The difference between, a truly world-class professional fighter versus kind of everybody else is they still look good in the third round. I can get up there and maybe get one round in, right, and look okay with my hands up and proper kicks and punches. But by the third round, where you're gassed, because it's been a misallocation of resources. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you were saying that, I was visualizing Conor McGregor fight Floyd Mayweather. It looked like he was he going to knock him out in that first round, and then as it got into the second, even to the third round, it was very clear the difference in the level.
Right.
So yeah, that it's really interesting. Thinking about that. If I could ask you about the discipline of being a martial artist, you said even before you were waking up to go to jiu-jitsu at 5 a.m., you've been getting up every single day and going to work. What kind of parallels do you see between the discipline of a martial artist and the discipline of high-level business people?
Really good question. I think there's huge amounts of parallel, because it just takes dedication, and when I was a young broker, and I had no money, and I grew up, with a single mom, and, in kind of less than fortunate environment. And, I grew up, working from the age of, 11 or 12 years old. I was going from door to door asking about, doing odd jobs for neighbors. As soon as I could get my work permit, I was a janitor at the library. I worked at a gas station, pumping gas and changing tires and doing inspection stickers. I remember working double shifts because I used to go to the gas station and I would go change tires at Sears at night. And I remember being so exhausted, I'd fall asleep downstairs in the tire room, on like a break. But it's, it's the same thing in my drive for whether it was Muay Thai or Jiu Jitsu. It was that, wanting to accomplish something and always believing that, given the choice, I'm going to live the next couple decades anyway. And, the thing is with martial arts, I've always said, I might as well be putting my energy into something rather than just kind of going and running or going to the gym and lifting weights, actually learning something. But when I was a young broker, I was the first one in the office. They used to call me the janitor because I was the first one in and I was the last one to leave. I would turn the lights on and off.
Yeah.
And it's that same type of dedication where you just got to come in and grind it out. And it's the same thing with Spanish. Even those days that I don't want to do it and I've got a million other things going on, and my Spanish teacher pops up on my screen, I just do it. And sometimes you're going through the motions, but it pays off. And it's the same thing with business. It's even those days that I don't want to go into work, and the pressure is heavy, and I'm having sleepless nights about a portfolio company that's in some hot water. It's rare for me to not want to go to work. I mean, I've certainly had some of those periods of my life, going through 2008 crisis and then going through, recently some of the pandemic stuff. But, you get on the other side of that. You figure out how to sweep and to get back on top, and you just keep going. It's a valuable lesson, the dedication of learning a martial art and not giving up, because you were talking about how, people come into the gym and they get smashed and they don't come back. My old Muay Thai coach used to always say, we never punch the first time guests in the face, right? The first time students that come in, because they'll never come back to school, right?
Yeah.
But that's part of it, right? I mean, the other thing that I often say is the difference between a professional fighter and everybody else is the ability to get hit in the face and keep going. Right?
Yeah.
Most people get hit in the face, they won't know what the hell hit them, and they're down for the count. But professional fighter keeps coming forward.
Yeah, that's the similar trait with an entrepreneur too. I often make the same parallel with business. People who want to open a business, you should be expecting that you're getting into a fight. It's a business fight. Most of the time, you're going to be getting beat up. Most of the time, you're going to be in uncomfortable positions. Most of the time, it's very few days are closing big deals, getting big clients. It's mostly dealing with the minutia of running a business and dealing with the complexities, the laws, it's not always the fun victory parties, putting on a tuxedo and celebrating. In a fight, some fighters are lucky if they get that beautiful knockout punch in their whole career. So right. I love that parallel in business. And a lot of first-time business owners and people who are starting small businesses, they forget that. They get into it because it was their passion and they love doing it. And then that passion goes away real fast once the reality set in.
Yeah. And you've just got to have that mentality of, you want to accomplish something, at all costs, right? It's get in there. I mean, I think the other advantage that I think I had from a personal perspective in my business career is I didn't start a family until much later in my life. I'm 43 and I have 2 kids and one on the way now. I just had my first child at like 41. And so, for 20 years before that, I really had only myself and my business to focus on. Sometimes having, other things like a family or something. I mean, I'll be very honest, like today I choose my time. I want to be with my family, any free time I have, because ex-COVID, I mean, I spent a lot of time working. I spent a lot of time on the road traveling. Pre-COVID, I was in London once a month. I'm traveling around the world to the West Coast. I'm traveling to Asia. I'm traveling to South America monthly. And, every waking moment I want to spend with family. But I didn't have that to think about when I was building my business, and now I have the luxury of, not that I work any less hard, but I'm able to work at a different level, and use my energy and use my resources in a different way. But very similar to Jiu Jitsu or to martial arts, it's like I can do that because I've been in the trenches. I know what it's like to be an analyst. I know what it's like to be a salesperson. I know what it's like to do customer service or client service. I know what it's like to do operations, and I've had that experience. And that's like the same thing, when you get a black belt. The old saying of, it's black belt is just a white belt that turns black from rolling a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing in business. You kind of learn all these pieces along the way, and in my business, I run my core business is a family office advisory business, which has really, the industry has really kind of developed over the last 15 or 20 years in this family office space, as there's been this big proliferation of global wealth. And so, I learned the business as the business was learning the business, and as the industry was evolving. And, the other thing is, sometimes, those early experiences that you have in life. I remember when I was a broker, when I first came out of college, I studied engineering and I went to work in investment banking for about a year. And then, I wanted to do more of the kind of, shaking hands. And a guy that worked in my office said, you're a good salesperson. You should go become a broker. And at first I was like, I want to work in investment banking. I want to work in, hedge funds or something like that. Being a broker, I mean, that's kind of like, being a car salesman, that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
And, and I did it, and I went and I started with the phone book and literally dialing for dollars, calling people up and asking for money. And that was even though I hated it then, and I was kind of embarrassed to say what I was doing 20 years ago, because of the way the industry evolved over the last 20 years, you look 20 years later, I own a firm where I employ all of these people that, I say all the time, college is where A students teach B students to work for C students. I was a C student, in college, and I hire the A students, to work for me today. But it's, I got my black belt in business, just kind of grinding it out, one step along the way, step by step, and figuring it out, and getting smashed and getting a little win here, lots of losses, spinning my tires, chasing things that, I probably today I wouldn't chase, because I've gotten much better at deciding, what I'm going to chase and where the juice is worth the squeeze.
Sure.
When you're young, you have time, right? And I actually have a friend that says that, during the three stages of your life, you're always balancing the time you have, your health, and your wealth. And when you're young, you have lots of time and you have lots of health, but you have no money. When you're kind of middle, you maybe got some money and you've got some health, but you've got no time. And then when you get older, you've got the money and you've got the money and you've got the time, but you may not necessarily have the health. So it's always kind of trying to optimize for these three things.
How much of your time now at your company is spent leading teams and mentoring young people?
I would say probably 30% of my time.
Yeah.
I have a pretty young staff.
Yeah. The reason why I asked that is only because of, what you were just saying and, sharing what you've learned along this journey. It's such a valuable lesson. It's something that I love to share with people is they always seem to look at people who have achieved the level of success that you've been able to achieve across so many different disciplines and just say that you must have just gotten there. It was handed to you.
Overnight success.
They don't see the janitor, Paul. They don't see the sweating on the mat, Paul. They only get to see sitting behind a desk or closing big deals, Paul. And as a fighter, as a martial artist, you just know about that sweat, that grind, the blood. I mean, how much blood it takes. I'm endlessly fascinated with that journey and people who have had. Most of the people that I speak to are not in the position that you're in. A lot of people are starting businesses. They have businesses. They've had some measure of success, but to have started a successful business and to show up continuously and sweat on that mat, I mean, it's a real grind, and I want more people to know about that.
Yeah. It takes a lot to get there, but it also takes a lot to stay there.
Yeah.
My mom always says, a guy's first job in life is to make the money. The second job is to hold on to it. And I've seen lots of folks that have made it and kind of screwed it up, so
Sure.
I work just as hard as I did 20 years ago. Again, it's just kind of a different type of work. I got 40 people here that work in my office, and there's, maybe a half a dozen of us that are coming into the office now because of COVID. But I enjoy coming into the office. I was home for several months when we had the office shut down in the kind of depths of the pandemic. But, come September, I just said, I got to get out of the house. Little kids and with Sesame Street on in the background, it wasn't conducive to video calls and stuff. So I got to get back to the office. But it's just, again, it takes a lot to get there, but it also takes a lot to stay on top. Right.
Yeah,
and make sure you don't get that ring rust. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I love coming to the office. When you do what you love and you run your own business, it's a pleasure to come into your office and your place. It's like going to my gym. I go to my dojo. Yep. It's an absolute happy place. I get a euphoria every time that I go. Actually, let me correct that. I do not get euphoria. I've sat in the parking lot, dreaded going in, not wanting to get beat up. I don't always feel the same way about my office, but I do sometimes feel that way about work. If there's something I'm dealing with that I don't don't want to deal with, employment issues or.
That's an interesting thing you say. I truly believe that one of the big qualities of a leader is the ability to have difficult conversations.
Yeah.
Very much like a fight. Most people, the average person on the street does not want to jump into a fight. Yeah. And it's the same thing with having difficult conversations, whether it's with, an employee over termination or some kind of employment issue, whether it's, whether it's a competitor or whether it's a customer over something that went wrong, or an investor with something that went sideways. That and I'm often called in to be the person that has those difficult conversations with folks. And, I found that, one of the things that helps is kind of humanizing the situation a bit and trying to connect with that person and, letting them know that, whatever it is, sometimes there's no way around it. Sometimes, I've just had to be the bad guy, and I'm generally one that never shies down from a fight.
Yeah.
But, and my partners know that oftentimes I'm the one that's kind of sent in to have that difficult conversation because I'm, kind of ready to go.
So they send you in. How do you feel? Do you feel like you're sharpening up your tactical skills when you're rolling on the mat? I mean,
One of the things that I love about rolling is that, when you're rolling and somebody's trying to rip your head off, you can't really think about much else.
yeah,
It's not like taking a shower in the morning where you're thinking about all the things that you've got in your day. And a lot of times I leave the gym and I say, geez, if that's as rough as it gets today, I think I'm going to be all good.
yeah. There's so many parallels in thinking tactically. George St. Pierre was on the Joe Rogan podcast once, and he was talking about life and training as a pyramid. And he said that, the bottom base of the pyramid was the physical skills you need. Then the next layer was the technical skills you need. And then the third was the tactical skills, and then the mental skills. And I thought that was a great way of kind of describing jiu-jitsu and business and life, and the physicality of getting up and understanding it, and the technical side of, listen, you have to know the certain techniques in order to do jiu-jitsu, but the tactical side is something that is way more nuanced. It's harder to talk about, and when your partners are sending you in to have these difficult conversations, there's business tactics that you learn. Another way of saying it was I took a seminar with John Donahart, who's famously teaches at Renzo Gracie's Academy, for those that are going to watch this and don't know. And he talked about being backstage at a boxing match one time and seeing Bernard Hopkins. And he said one thing that changed his outlook on it. And he said that, when is someone the most vulnerable? And it said that as they were throwing the punch, as they were being offensive, that's when they were at their most vulnerable for a counter strike. So I'm just interested if this is like something you think about, or have you polished this? Like, when you're on the mat, are you thinking tactically yet? I know in Muay Thai you must, but how about in Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, I'm definitely thinking tactically. I think, as George put it, that last piece of the pyramid is that mental. I think you could sub in strategic, right? Because you have to understand all those other components and tactics before you can get to big picture strategy, and, like they always say in a fight, whether it's, on the mats or, in a ring, is, you kind of want to go in and know what you're going to say. Right. And know, and not just be in the moment where you're kind of reacting and countering or whatever, but actually, so you're on the attack. Right. And, the other big thing about jiu-jitsu, which is very parallel to business, is this notion of being a few steps ahead, where your opponent is automatically on their heels if you're 3 steps ahead.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in business, when you go into a meeting and being prepared, and knowing what you want to say. I've always been really good at sales and at negotiating, because both of those things require kind of split second thinking, and the ability to kind of, evolve, and more so the ability to understand where that other person is coming from. And frankly, I'm not so good at, being super prepared. I mean, my twin brother, talking about how different people can be, my twin brother is the exact opposite. My twin brother has got like a photographic memory. We'll go into a client meeting and he will have read the entire 100-page memo and everything's got notes, and that's not my style. He's always been way further ahead in doing the homework, and I'm always the kind of like, okay, I'm ready. I'm good to go. I've got enough knowledge. I can not wing it, but it's art and science, right? And I'm really good at the art side of it.
Yeah.
Where I would say my brother is much better at the science side of it. And it's the same thing in fighting. You build these basic skills, and understanding jab crosses, or roundhouse kick, or sweeps, or the basics of an arm bar, triangle, or something, and then it's figuring out how you put them in, right? Because it's, as you know, it's setting the moves up, right? It's not pulling an arm bar off. It's how you set that arm bar up, right? Or how you set up that knee or that elbow or something. Because you can't just walk in and throw an elbow to somebody, right? You've got to figure out how you set it up. And it's the same thing in a business meeting or in those difficult conversations. It's setting things up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things in business that I'm always balancing is the difference between, like you in sometimes in combat sports, you are taking your opponent's soul, you're crushing them, you are trying to win. And then in other times in the sport, you are fostering and building amazing relationships in order to grow. And most of the people that you train with are your training partners, and you're developing this team mentality. And then you have your competitors who are trying to put you under. I find that so interesting. And the most explicit place I see it is in the mat and in the gym. You've been training, you told me, primarily with one training partner in the mornings. Have you ever, or are you making it an effort to kind of train with the team?
I am. I try. I've got a really hectic schedule, and usually at that kind of 5:30, 6:30 hour at night, I'm home seeing my kids before I have a dinner commitment.
Yeah.
But I definitely try to get in because training with the brown belt or black belt every single day is great. It sharpens your skills, but you don't get all those subs that you get when you get to train against another way.
That's exactly why I brought it up. Like my wish for you is to train with people at all the different levels, to be able to see your growth and to say, oh man, like actually, wow, I would imagine your defense has gotten pretty sharp training with a brown belt for all the months.
Lots of knee shields, right? Lots of knee shields. So.
Yeah. And then, bringing that back towards business, at the level that you're at, conducting business with, these families and high net worth individuals and major corporations, it's high stakes. There's a lot on the line, and you've only gotten to that point because of the work that preceded it.
But it's all that work leads to experience, which leads to confidence, right? And that's the same thing with whether you're playing soccer or you're a top hockey player or you've got a black belt in jiu-jitsu. When you've got a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you've fought so many different types of competitors, so many different sizes of competitors. And so you always have maybe a little bit of butterflies. I was talking to one of our fighters from Glory once, who's world champion guy. And he said to me, Robin Van Roosmalen, and he said to me, Paul, he goes, I still have butterflies before every single fight. It's a little bit less in business. I don't necessarily have butterflies before I go into big meetings, but I'm very good at dealing with ultra high net worth individuals and families. I've been around it for 20 years. I understand that they go to the bathroom the same way I go to the bathroom in the morning, and I can relate to them. And people do business with people they like. People do business with people like themselves, right? And so it's pretty interesting when you look at my client base. I actually work with a lot of folks like myself that are super driven, and even though they're worth X hundreds of millions of dollars, if I text them, they get right back to me, because they're self-made and they're entrepreneurs in some way themselves. But it's there's that huge parallel again with martial arts and going into a business meeting where I'm very often I'm coaching folks. I started a charter school about 10 years ago in kind of the inner city here in Boston, and I'm constantly kind of coaching a lot of the development folks about how to deal with high net worth potential donors and even our executive director who's comes out of a world working in public schools and does not have that level of experience. And it can be intimidating at first, very much like sitting out in the parking lot and being afraid to go in and get smashed on the mats by a bunch of bigger, stronger, higher ranked folks. But the more you do it, the better you get at it, right? Like anything. So.
I'm really happy to hear you say that. That beautiful that you have that charter school. What I've found about the most successful people that I either know or that I read, because I love to read, I read their books. They want people to be successful. They want everybody to see like, I put my pants on just like you. I did it. You could do it. That's why I'm writing this book. I mean, I want everybody to know that they can do it too. Most of the guys that I train with, men and women, are from every socioeconomic class, color, religion, and they come together on this mat, and you have teachers and nurses and garbage men, and everybody is getting along, and they kind of all want to know what got the other one to where they are. And if you grew up in a house of nurses and you became a nurse, you say, you never know that you could kind of go out and do more. And so here you are, giving so generously of your time into the charter school program. And I mean, I imagine and I hope that these young people, they see you and say, I could do that. You know, in my house, it's all about business.
I hope they do too. I also give a lot of time to a really great organization in town called youve, which takes young folks that have a GED or a high school diploma and trains them to do, financial operations or, and places them in really great, great opportunities. And I, one of the reasons I do this is I want to go and show these guys that you can do this too. It's just a lot of hard work. It's just a lot of grind, a lot of giving up, a lot of 5 and 6 a.m. mornings, even when you don't want to. I mean, in my 20s, I'm not going to say I didn't have a lot of fun. I certainly had a lot of fun. But I mean, a lot of those nights where my friends were out partying, I was home studying for my CFA. I have this thing called a CFA, which is kind of like a black belt in finance, right? And it's the great thing about it, very similar to a black belt, is, when you see a black belt, you kind of know what hoops they had to jump through, right? And what they had to learn. And it's the same thing as with the CFA. It's a global exam that's been around for, well over 5 or 6 decades. Yep. And, that, whether you're in India or whether you're in China or whether you're in, Boston or California, you've had to kind of learn the same skills. You've had to memorize some of the stuff, even though we don't really use our memories that much to come up with capital asset pricing model or Black-Scholes model. You have to recall that from memory, but you've had to go through those motions.
So that's a very good way of putting it. All the people I know who studied for their CFA and passed, it's in 3 parts, right? And the people who get to that 3rd part, the sweat, the blood, and the tears that they put in to get to that point. So excellent parallel. Well, listen, you helped me in ways you don't even know, because you gave me a great conversation and a lot of things to think about. Gave me some great sound bites and some gems to contribute to this book. So good. I want to thank you for being a part of this project. I can't tell you how passionate I am about it. I see these guys and gals who are so good at jiu-jitsu and so good at martial arts, and they got it because of how hard they worked. And then they want to go off and start a business, and they think that they're going to be black belts in a day, and they give up too often. And I want them to keep going. And so I think it's a worthy cause to try to build some entrepreneurship in this crazy world.
Good stuff, man. Happy to be a contributor.